Hello, welcome to this episode of LabLife for the IBMS Podcast. I am Dr. Martin Khechara from the University of Wolverhampton, and I'm going to be your guest host for this episode. Now, students all over the country are going to be returning back to university come the end of September. And of course, many of them are going to be coming back from learning within the pandemic and having experiences in the pandemic to studies, of course, in biomedical science. And students have still been practicing and studying all the way through the pandemic panic. So what we thought, it'd be really good for us to talk to a student to find out about what they've been up to and their experiences. And I'm here with one of our fantastic students from the Department of Biomedical Science and Physiology at the University of Wolverhampton, called Steven Schnabel. How are you doing, Steven? How's things?
Hi, Martin. I'm all right, thank you. Keeping busy.
Excellent. Busy's good, absolutely. Okay, so just to kick off, why don't you tell us what you're all about, what you've been doing, and all about yourself?
Hello, I'm Steven. I'm a third-year biomedical scientist student at the University of Wolverhampton. I'm technically going to be going into my final year because I've just come off a placement at New Cross Hospital studying clinical chemistry, but I do have a whole host of experiences, both pre-COVID, post-COVID, both within the lab, some internal stuff with the uni, some external stuff. I've been abroad, I've done some private lab experiences, I've worked in the NHS. So a rounded experience as a whole within the lab, really. So keeps me busy.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, you mentioned there you've been on placement and you suggested that you've even been abroad. Why didn't you tell us about what these placements that you've been on?
Okay, yeah. So I did a really short placement in about 2017 where I went to the Liverpool Science Park and worked in Biograd, which was basically, I wanted to get some bit of lab experience because when you're in high school, you only really have the practical sessions that you have, like the small little snippets through A levels and GCSEs. But I wanted to perfect my technique a bit more. So I basically spent a week perfecting my pipetting, perfecting how to use agar, so microbiology. So we covered a bit for microbiology, hematology, clinical chemistry, all basic fundamental principles, which obviously would later be covered in university, but it just sort of gave me a little bit of a head start. I then started university, and straight away I decided, you know what, lab placement is not just enough for me. I'm going to go abroad. So I signed up for the Erasmus placement scheme. So that was basically where the university funded for me to go and fly out there. So I only had to put a little bit of money towards it. And then I actually went out to Prague for a 2-month internship, working with Nella, who was a PhD student who's working on Bordetella pertussis, which is basically like a bacteria that can cause whooping cough in a nutshell. And so basically I was investigating that with her for her research project. So I actually got hands-on experience, and it was actually interesting to see how an international lab differed from a UK lab and how policies and procedures were slightly different. And it was actually quite eye-opening. Like I was like, oh, because I obviously brought all my British equipment with me, like my lab coat and my gloves and my goggles and everything. And they were like, oh, you don't need that. We do it like this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So those were really interesting points. And actually, it did help my study later on, particularly when it came to how to do certain techniques, or then like when I was doing the practical sessions, which are embedded into the course, it was like, I do it like this. And the lecturer was like, well, you can do it like this, but otherwise you could do it like this. So it was really, really interesting. I approached lab life in a different way that I had normally done before. So like I had a bit of experience, but it kind of opened it up even more. So that was from a private side of things. And then I actually was fortunate that I got to do a actual proper placement. So my course is normally just a 3-year course, so the BSc Biomedical Science. But if you get a chance to do a sandwich placement between second and third year, it becomes a BSc Applied Biomedical Science. So I was fortunate enough to get a placement to do my IBMS Certificate of Competency, which basically means that the institute can say that I have the knowledge to practice as a biomedical scientist within a hospital. So I basically completed that this year, so that's through the pandemic in chemistry. And again, although I had all the experience, it was interesting to see how I applied it practically, because obviously you have only so much time within the university to do it. And then it's like, you need to know this, 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 and this. And it's like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of it like that before. So placements have a positive and a negative.
So what was it like being a placement student in an NHS Trust lab through the pandemic? Because you've been right at the thick of it, right?
Yeah. I was right to think. Well, actually, it was really interesting because obviously my second year kind of was coming to just at the start of the pandemic. So obviously the pandemic hit in the March. I still had a couple of months left. So I was finalising my placement, and I almost didn't get it. It was very, very close between coming to it. So when it got to about August, I still hadn't heard anything. And so I was thinking, oh, I haven't got it. And then I got the phone call. And I was like, yes, I've actually got it in the hospital that I wanted. So my emotions were running high, and I'm going like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I went there, and so I was excited because actually I had been to the hospital before because I do have family who work at the hospital. So I was lucky. So it wasn't completely new territory. So I was kind of like, it was going to go either way. I was hoping I was going to love it because I have been to different hospitals and spent like days in different hospitals just to see how different labs function. But actually being there every day, one thing that was interesting was normally with lectures, I'm not always in every single day 9 to 5. So I was soon having to learn, because bearing on with the pandemic, I hadn't got enough. Like, obviously, I had finished uni. I didn't have to get up every day. I was relaxing. I was doing different things. So all of a sudden, I had to kickstart myself back into a 9 to 5 working day. Or sometimes it might not be 9 to 5. It might be 8 o'clock in the morning, or working till 6 or 7. So it really varied. So timings were slightly different. So, I mean, obviously, I'm used to that. But I just needed to sort of train my brain to say, no, I do need to get up. I do need to get back to work. And to be honest, the placement were great from the get-go. I had a training plan. They taught me through everything. I had a training officer. The uni were helpful. So I was in constant contact with everyone. And to be honest, you know me as well. I just grab everything with both hands and just go for it. So,
absolutely.
like, obviously there's going to be like shadow periods where like the biomedical scientists are going to be like, oh, I'm going to show you how to do it. And then I'm just sort of like, they show me once, and I'm like, can I just get on with it? So I think because I had that kind of can-do attitude, like I want to get on with it, I got so much more out of my placement so early on. And then obviously there were other students with me as well who were like, how are you doing that? How are you doing that? I'm like, because I'm just going for it. I made the most out of it. I think I got the most out of it, I think, out of most people, just because I like to learn. I like to get on with it. I just sort of attacked it. And to be honest, I was there. I could almost say that I felt like there wasn't even a pandemic. The only difference, generally, I feel like being on placement was that I had to wear a mask all day.
Right.
Which doesn't bother me because I do that for my hobbies like my St. John and stuff. So it doesn't really matter. So I actually felt in a better position by being on placement because I was in contact with a lot of the students who were at the university doing the courses with our group. And they were like, we've got this to do and this to do, but we can't go in because there's no lectures, or we can't go in because it's recorded and I'm struggling. And then I'm thinking, I'm quite lucky here because I'm basically getting a practical, a final year practical that's just a year long instead of just a short couple of months. So I was going into work every day. So in actual fact, my life was kind of pretty normal, if normal is the right word. Like, I was getting up, I was going to work, I was coming back. And that was my routine. So in actual fact, I think in a funny sort of way, the placement students, they haven't been affected by the pandemic. So, I mean, a couple of comments from the hospital were made that actually under normal circumstances, we would have had a lot more face-to-face teaching and physically showing and explaining a bit more about the principles. Whereas with like social distancing, reduced numbers in labs. And because there were so many students, there wasn't that opportunity this year instead. So, I mean, I've made the most out of it, and I think I've had the best placement possible. Others might say that they wished I had a bit more contact, but that's what happened.
So did you get involved in any of the actual COVID testing while you were there?
So I did an element. So the New Cross Hospital is basically, so hospitals are forming a new giant hub. So the Black Country Pathology Service. So you've got New Cross Hospital's Binding, you've got Walsall, you've got Shrewsbury, Telford, Russell's Hall. New Cross is going to be the new giant hub for pathology.
Yeah.
So New Cross has got the LAMP study lab, which is where they were doing the testing.
Sure.
And then additionally in microbiology, they were originally doing the testing.
Of course.
Now, due to the sheer amount of it, eventually everything was moving over to Russell's Hall. Russell's Hall was mainly doing the spike proteins. Because obviously COVID is changing, the tests keep changing. So originally, just before I started placement, when it was the peak of lockdown, New Cross were running it on new analyzers, but have since, because that's now moved. So I mean, I spent a very little amount of time in the LAMP lab, which is basically it's a new form of PCR. So like it's a polymerized chain reaction. So instead of something going small, going really big, instead of fluctuating the temperatures, it's basically keeping the temperature constant and measuring it that way. So I learned little bits about it. But I know a lot of other students had the opportunities to go and help out there from the university.
Yeah, they did.
So I wasn't really involved, but I was a little bit in there, and I did get to see everything. But I mainly was involved, not from a biomedical science perspective, but I was mainly involved more vaccinating in private outside of science. So I was more doing that type of stuff. But I mean, it was present. Like I was booking in samples from specimen reception, and there was those present. But I wasn't really directly dealing with the samples.
Oh, that's fair enough. I mean, I know through your work with the university, you've been quite involved in actually promoting biomedical science, haven't you? So do you just want to tell us a little bit about the sort of public engagement work you've been doing to promote the disciplines?
Of course. So outside of the course, I am the course representative, the student course representative. So basically that means that if any students on the course for that particular year have any issues, I can raise them with Martin himself, or I can go to the course tutor or the lead lecturer or the head of biomed and basically be like, they're unhappy about this. What can we do to improve it? Basically to improve student experience.
Of course.
So I attend a lot of different meetings. I get to know all the nitty gritty stuff, which is quite nice as well, what's going on. But then also I'm a student ambassador as well for the university. So I help out on open days. I do a few different things. I've helped out do a lot of different lab sessions. So when primary schools or high schools come in for STEM engagement in the main labs at the university, I either show them about, give them a lab tour, talk about my experiences.
Fantastic.
I've also helped Martin do the STEM engagement shops. So we were in the Wolfruna Centre and we set up a stall, and I was there promoting biomedical science and helping out here, there and everywhere. I recently, during lockdown, did a Zoom call for a couple of the different different high schools, basically talking about my experience. So I've kind of done a lot of stuff, both externally, internally. Oh, I was at the Big Bang. I helped at the Big Bang at the NEC as well, promoting different things here. So I'm a people person. I like to talk to people. I can pretty much talk to anybody. I mean, I was talking about biomedical science at the open day. So, I mean,
of course,
I could talk about anything. I've got a lot of experience. I can talk about it from different perspectives. So it's very beneficial.
Yeah, and of course, it's dead valuable to be talking about that sort of thing. Why do you think it's important to promote, biomedical science?
I think it's important to promote biomedical science because it's not as recognised as much as people think. Because if, for example, if someone goes to a hospital, they go, "I'm feeling ill," the doctor takes some bloods. People just assume that the doctors do everything, or they think they do. And so actually, if you think about it, when you're having your bloods taken, what actually then happens to that sample?
Yeah.
Who's going to, what tests are done? People don't necessarily know what happens to that blood, where it goes, how we get the tests. Like the doctors might say, "Oh, you've got UNEs that are this, LFTs that are that. You've got a pneumonia that is this." They're not going to know that. They're just words.
Yeah.
They're just words to people. So it's a really important job that people don't necessarily get credit for. It's and I think it's an issue that it's being addressed a lot more now.
Yes.
In that a lot of the nurses do this. We need it now. And it's no, it takes time for tests to be done. It's an interesting, actually, from the placement, just seeing how underrepresented is not the right word, I would say, but it's it's interesting to see the perspectives of different things. And I was actually doing a bit of research with a couple of students about it for their project, about seeing how it differs.
Sure.
So it's a really interesting one. I think obviously it's a very, very popular course, but then because I think the great thing about biomed is, yes, you can work in a hospital, but actually it kind of just sets the boundary of the basics, because it's like you're kind of taught everything. You taught chemistry, you taught a bit of hematology and blood, immunology and fighting infection, microbiology, histology, cytology. There's loads. So it kind of sets the baseline of where you want to go. Yeah. So I think obviously people like to specialize, but I think most people normally go with the biomed level first, and then they can progress, because it's a great base for medicine. It's a great base for clinical science. It's a great base for becoming a consultant. The world's your oyster with it. So it is interesting, actually, being a biomedical scientist. And you don't see it that often, but it is nice that he's slowly started to come a bit more, because I mean, obviously the courses are always popular and everyone always goes in it, because I think everyone likes biology. Biology, I think, is like almost like the universal, I shouldn't say universal sciences. So it's like some people struggle with physics, some people struggle with chemistry, biology, like it's all around us. So it's easy for people to understand. So that's why I think people like biomedical science, because it's about stuff that fundamentally is in front of us that we can see. Yeah, whereas like physics is stuff that we can't see, and chemistry can sometimes just be hard with the equations. Yeah. Whereas biology is all around us. So biomedical science is just the nice thing that's there. Sure.
So what is it though about what is it about biomedical science that does it for you? I mean, why do you study it? You know, is there something in particular that got you onto it, or
no? Well, I've always, as I say, I always personally really liked biology. So like from year 7, I wanted to go to university. Now, actually, funny enough, I didn't originally want to do biomedical science. I actually wanted to do biochemistry, because I actually really liked chemistry. And when I was researching stuff, I mean, I was looking at a bit of the money side of stuff, I'll be honest. I was having a look, and with the biochemistry stuff, it was like, oh, you can do this, that, and the other. And I hadn't heard of biomed before. I only heard of biochemistry, because that's what we discussed. And it's like, oh, it's all labby based, it's doing stuff. And I quite like the chemistry practicals and in high school. So I was like, oh, I'll do that. Then A-level chemistry came along, and it didn't go well. And my chemistry journey, it sunk. Like the Titanic, it went down.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah. And so I decided instead I would actually go for biology, and I looked at the biomedical science route, and actually it just fitted for me. It was in a hospital that I wanted to go to. I could choose a discipline I wanted to go to. I've had massive support from my family as well, who work in the hospital. So I've had a massive science background, so I've always been pushed that way. I mean, I love my first aid as well, so anatomy and physiology, I like that, so I'm always engaged with that. I personally just like to help people. I like all the stuff I do. It's just ingrained into my DNA. I love to help people. So I just found it fascinating. I just grew to biology. And so when I found biomedical science, and I was like, oh, I can do all this biology stuff in different disciplines, I was like, that's for me. I mean, in my 6th form, we went to the National Careers Fair in Birmingham at the NEC every year. And I was always drawn to the science stalls, but I was always going to like the biomed and seeing what stuff's there. I just also find science fascinating. Like I'm hoping to go to Congress next year once I've got my BMS degree and I've actually got a job. I would love to go, because I love listening to new innovations. So I love going to the conferences and listening to stuff like I'm already listening to like specialist portfolio stuff, even though I've only just completed it. I love reading.
Never too early.
It's never too early. No, it's just personally for me, I just love it. It's just one of those, like, it's just a thing I've found. Whether or not I then adventure off into clinical science or something like a consultant pathologist or something along those lines, we'll see. But I'm only starting out. I've only just started my journey.
No, that's right.
Time. I've got a bit of time to get my feet in the water.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you you have been quite lucky. You know, you've got lots of outside interests, like you said, you do your St. John's and all that sort of thing, and you've been volunteering, doing vaccinations, and you know, and you've been on placement. So you've had a lot to do, and you've had a big involvement with the pandemic at a variety of different levels. But some of your colleagues, you know, that you might represent on your degree, for instance, on our pathways here at Wolverhampton in biomedical science, haven't had those opportunities. So how do you think the pandemic has affected those other people studying biomedical science?
The pandemic has affected a lot of people mentally and physically.
Yeah.
Like, obviously they had, from a practical side of view, year 3 is always like the golden year. Like, you're doing your lab dissertation. It's the most amount of time you spend in the lab. I mean, you spend like 50% is taught, and then the giant 50% is your lab practical. And a lot of people do enjoy a wet project. So a wet project is where you're physically actually doing something, like you're in a lab doing something. Whereas this year, that went out the window and everybody had to do a dry project.
Yeah.
Now, some people, they don't have access to computers. They don't have necessary skills to do detailed research and looking through papers.
Sure.
Some people struggle to read. So it's like, I've known people who go like, and I know on a daily battle, the lecturers were struggling with students going, it's unacceptable, we can't do a wet project. We can't do a wet project. It's not right, it's not right. So I understand their frustration and I can see it, but obviously feasibly with like social distancing and everything, and getting people in lab. And then also your time, instead of doing one practical for 30 people, you're having to do 20 practicals for 6 people. It's like, it's not feasible. So I think it impacted people up quite a bit on that side, like that practical is a big part of a biomedical science degree. And to suddenly say, no, you've got to stay at home and sit on a laptop and then find out about something that's relatively new. Like I had a colleague who was doing something about cancer, and it's like, we need you to find out if certain things are in this cancer. So they were using specialist software, but there was very little out there. So it was difficult. And I mean, yes, she aced it. She did really well at it. But it was a long hurdle. There were tears along the way of going like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Or like because you're not seeing the results yourself, you're reading one paper, going down one rabbit hole, and then all of a sudden it's like, you're going down the wrong rabbit hole. You need to be over here. And you're like, I've just spent 6 months looking at that information, which I mean will probably happen on a wet project as well. But I mean, given that you're at home anyway, with all the stress and everything, I think it was difficult. I think also, obviously, the uni are now adopting this blended learning style where like you're going to have some stuff that's online, you're going to have stuff in person. It's not always going to be in a lecture theatre. I think obviously with the pandemic, everyone was sort of dropped in it all at once. So it took a bit for the uni to adapt completely to this new way of life. And like, there was obviously bumps along the way and everyone's going like, my video's not working and, oh, this isn't happening. And I'm just going like, oh dear. But I mean, I think we're fortunate that at least we had Canvas. So at least we have our online portal where all the lecturers post everything there. So at least the resources were available to us. But I think a lot of the students missed the physical face-to-face contact. And I think it was quite funny when actually students had to come in and it was like the biggest thing, like actually to see a lecturer, to see a person. And obviously all the lecturers were great. They took it in their stride and we had the Zoom meetings and stuff. But I still think it's not the same, like physically handing a piece of work to someone, say, please read through it.
No, quite right.
Obviously on placement, I was a little bit more fortunate that I needed to see people. So it was like, although it was on Zoom, as the pandemic came to the end, like lectures were slowly starting to come back into their offices to do bits of work. So like I was seeing you every so often. I was seeing a couple of the other senior lecturers. So it was interesting. So as I say, I was fortunate, but others really haven't been. And it's led to interesting developments. Obviously, mental health is now a real big issue.
Yeah, of course.
And obviously, there have been some tragedies surrounding students recently in the news around exams and everything. So it's really affected people. And actually, the uni are very good mental health wise in dealing with that and a couple of the things. So it is interesting. I think regardless of just biomedical science, being a student throughout the pandemic has been hard.
Of course.
Again, obviously, for those working at home, they're obviously always stuck at home, but I was in student accommodation. So at least I had a hall of 6.
Yes.
So at least I was with somebody, whereas some other students were just in their house with their family.
Yeah.
They didn't really have any friends from their course other than physically seeing them over Zoom like this. So it's impacted everybody slightly differently.
Yeah.
But I think everybody has then taken it in their own stride to react differently.
Of course.
So I think people have made the pandemic how they want to make it.
Yeah.
Some people have argued and gone, this is really unfair. And some people have just gone, you know what? It's happened. What can we do? Let's just get on with it and make the most out of it. And I still think actually grade-wise, I think a lot of people are still happy with what grades they've got.
Yeah.
And I do find it funny. It is interesting, even with certain, like when it's at home and stuff, when people have still struggled, you go like, you've got all your open books and stuff. Make the most of the opportunities that you've got. You've got the books in front of you. This exam is going to be easier than it would have been. So I think people have benefited from that.
Yeah, of course they have. So I think, carry on, sorry.
No, sorry, no, go on. No.
I think, universities across the country and Wolverhampton University of Wolverhampton, particularly have really gone to town on developing all their online resources and things like that. We've had the video conferencing solutions, we've had Teams, we've had Big Blue Button, we've been very lucky to have Canvas, and of course we've got the Panopto system to be able to record and transmit lectures and things like that. But I think the move to online teaching and the fact that everybody can't come in is driven by the fact that we needed to keep everybody safe right at that very beginning. Absolutely. And actually, I think now universities they've been wanting to move with the times and modernize. And the pandemic has pushed that technology forward. We've been at war with a virus, and war always pushes technology forward. Yeah. And actually, that's exactly what happened. And I hope moving forward now, as we come out of the pandemic, it's actually going to benefit our colleagues and the students studying, again, like you said, not just biomedical science. All right, then. So we've had a lot of bad, right? But there's got to have been some good, right? So what's been, in just a few words, what's been your most positive experience during the pandemic?
I think my most positive experience during the pandemic is actually that I've been able to do a placement in the first place, because the hospital could well in their right have just gone, we're not taking any students this year. Sure. It's too rushed off their feet. It's just going to be the staff in there. And then I would be doing my final year. And then hopefully I would have completed my degree. And then I would be looking for potentially a job to do my certificate. So having the opportunity to actually do a placement in the first place and be privileged enough to actually have a reason to be able to leave the house to go and work, because I was doing important work. Yeah, I think that's just been the best thing. Yeah. It's also just seeing how far we've come treatment-wise with the vaccines and the testing and everything, and how this time last year it was the world was basically ending this time last year. And how we've suddenly, like a phoenix, come out of the ashes and gone like, we've got testing, we've got this, we've got that, we've got the other. That's been the most positive. It's just seeing human spirit almost of, we will not be defeated, we will get through this. And yes, everyone's spirit has just crumbled at times and it's happened. But for me, I'm quite a positive person. I always try and see the positives in everything. And so even when I might not have got my placement, I was thinking, oh, well, I've got experience elsewhere. It's fine. I'll just complete my degree. I'll go somewhere else. I was always finding positives. Sure. So as I say, the best positive for me was actually doing this placement, because now, as of last month, I have now got my IBMS certificate of competency, which basically means I can practice in a hospital. I just need the knowledge from a degree to say I can practice in a hospital now, which is the best thing you can ask for, really, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So really the most positive is actually the year wasn't wasted. Even though I wasn't at uni, I've made the most. I've gained so much knowledge, so much practical experience, made great friends as well in the field. So like, obviously I've got my international connections, a couple of them, but now I've made connections within the NHS, which is a big organisation spread out across the country. I'm at least connected now a little bit more than I would have been. So positively of kind of just everything, really.
And
my experience has been a positive.
So have you done your verification now? So is that it?
Yes.
All done?
Yes, on the 21st of July, I had my verification.
Excellent.
I passed everything, signed off. It's all done and dusted. I've now just got to complete my final year going through it. I'm hopefully going to be doing my dissertation in-house as well at the hospital where I was at, working with the clinical scientists. And so, yeah, I'm just ready to start, to be fair. Like, I've enjoyed this rest period, and I'm a medical lab assistant, so I'm slightly lower than the BMS at the minute. So I'm working in the lab, but I just can't wait to just to get started and hopefully stay positive. Yeah,
fantastic. That's well done, a massive well done for that. And it is a big deal for our students and for us to see somebody getting on so well in the lab. So just to finish off today, right? Let's finish with a classic. All right. And so if you could give just one piece of advice to a student that was going to be studying biomedical science, it might be somebody thinking about moving into studying biomedical science and so on. What was the one piece of advice that you could give them?
Oh, interesting one. I think the thing is with biomedical science, if you're going to go into it, if you have an idea that you might like a particular discipline, for example, like you really like microbiology or you really like something else. If you go into, say, for a degree that's just in that subject, you're sort of limited to that particular subject.
Yeah.
Whereas with biomedical science, as I mentioned before, you suddenly have this freedom to decide where you want to go.
Sure.
So I personally would recommend, if you want to go into a particular science, a particular subject, go with biomedical science, because you'll have a baseline knowledge across all the courses. You'll have access to all the resources. And then actually you might decide that actually, no, immunology isn't for me. Or no, hematology is more for me. I quite like the idea of blood. Or no, actually microbes is more for me. So my advice is, if you want a career in science, start with the basics, build from there. If you want a career in the lab, start with biomedical science, start from the basics, build from there. Your main thing I would say is do your research. Science is very, very wide. Yes. You can go from anything from plants to space. It's very, very, it generally is, biology is very, it's wide. So my advice generally is do your research. If you want something with science, go biomed, because you learn everything then. You learn all your disciplines, and then you can decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because then with biomed, you've got that biomed degree. Say you go into chemistry like I've done, and you spend a year there and you go, actually, I'm not really into chemistry. I think I might go somewhere else. That degree kind of sets you up.
Sure.
So you have that ability to be flexible.
Yeah.
You can decide where you want to go. You're not set in stone. So that's my advice.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I think you're right. You know, it is a very adaptable program of study, and something that other people have said to me as well is, do your research, you know, and try and identify that discipline that you'd really like to work in earlier rather than later if you can. All right, and Stephen, it's been absolutely fantastic to speak to you today. Thank you for taking the time to chat to us for the LabLife section of the IBMS podcast, and good luck for the coming year.
You.
And I'll see you in the lecture theatre, hopefully sometime soon.
See you in the lecture theatre. See you soon.
See you later. Bye-bye.